So let's get started. Thank you so much, everyone who's on the call. I'm just going to briefly introduce myself and the other speaker. So my name is Wezam. I'm one of the speakers for this event, and this is our first webinar at Akili Learn. And the goal of this particular webinar or event is mostly talking about how Kenyan parents can help their kids get access to some of the best universities in the world, the likes of Oxford or Cambridge. I happen to have attended Oxford, and the other speaker on the call also attended the University of Oxford. And for a lot of people, they automatically either think it's going to be too expensive for them or they completely put it out of their minds. And we're basically saying it's not too far-fetched. If you're a parent that is ambitious for your child, it's not too far-fetched for your learner or your students to attend some of the best universities in the world. The difference between the kids who are able to go to some of these schools and those who don't is usually access to information, more so than anything else. And a lot of times, parents don't have the right information they need to help their kids go to some of these schools. So we're going to be talking about that. The goal and the hope is to give you information that would arm you to help you get your children access to these opportunities, whether it's in terms of scholarships or in terms of the admissions, or whatever else really. For many of these schools, it goes beyond just academics. There's also the involvement in extracurricular activities and many, many other things that help make a student's application to those schools successful. And when you don't have that information, you don't have that knowledge about what can help your child get in, you tend to be very streamlined and go for the easily available options. But as a parent, ideally, you want your child to have the best. And if the funding is not necessarily going to be a complete obstacle, there's no reason for your child not to get access to the best. So we have on the call Shruti Jain. I'm going to introduce her. Shruti is an Oxford alumni as well, but even better, she's helped many people get admission to schools such as Oxford. So not only Oxford, she's helped people get admission into the likes of Berkeley. She's helped students get admission into University of Cambridge and some other top schools. Many of those students have also gotten scholarships to those schools. So on one hand, she went to Oxford and got a full scholarship. She actually got 2 full scholarships, which is pretty amazing. But she's also helped other people get scholarships. So she's not only done this for herself, she's helped other people get these kinds of results as well. And she's on the call. I'm just going to let her say hi briefly and say 1 or 2 things before we jump right into asking questions. Shruti, over to you.
Thank you, Wes. So, hi everyone. Grateful to be part of this first webinar with Akili Learn. So, my objective is simple, right? Studying at Oxford was a life-changing opportunity for me. It broadened my horizons. It liberated me personally and professionally. And our objective is simple. We're here to give you a very clear direction and clarity on if you want your child to study at an institution like Oxford or an Ivy League name, what do you need to do and how do you need to think about it? So, yeah, that's all.
Fantastic. So we'll be letting you know this is what you need to do, this is how you need to think. And Shruti will be working us through her success and the other success stories that she's been able to help students to achieve. Bit of an introduction about myself. I also, like I said, I also attended University of Oxford, so I've had exposure to some really good schools. I did an executive program at Kellogg University, which is one of the best universities in the world as well. So I'm going to talk about my experience, and I am also involved with Akili Learn very actively. So I'm hoping even beyond what we'll be saying in terms of the admissions, I'm hoping we can give you useful information about Akili Learn and what Akili Learn does and see if there's value to be added in that regard. So I'm going to go to my questions for Shruti. Shruti, would you be so kind as to tell us a bit about your Oxford journey? What was that like getting into Oxford? What was your experience at Oxford?
So, I applied to Oxford 3 times. I had done my undergrad from Delhi. I studied business. Then I was an entrepreneur for 4 or 5 years, and I sold my business. And I was like, okay, well, I believe I have a great profile. I'm going to apply to Oxford. But, well, I did get in to Oxford and a bunch of other schools, but I needed a scholarship, right? I couldn't afford the tuition. And so I was rejected 2 times. And over these 2 years, I spoke to many people. I realized what frameworks work. And so what changed the third time was that I didn't change as a person. My profile remained the same, but I understood my positioning, right? Well, then I got into the MBA, but I also got two full ride scholarships. A full ride scholarship means your 100% tuition is paid, and they pay for your living expenses as well. So these scholarships, you can check them out. It's called the Skoll Scholarship. It's for social entrepreneurs, and there's the Laidlaw Scholarship. It's for women leaders. So I did that MBA program with Wes for 1 year. And after that, I lived in London for 2 years, and now I'm based in Denmark. So my strong application was not just on my achievements, but when I realized what positioning worked for me, it was about helping the university understand who I am, what have I done with my opportunities, what do I care about, and where am I going, right? So, I didn't have to be rich. I didn't need family connections. I did not necessarily come from an elite undergrad school. I went to a top school in India, yes, but it wasn't an Ivy League undergrad, right? All I did the third time around when it worked was that I told my story properly. So to give you a little bit of context, I started when I talk about entrepreneurship, I first started as a hydroponics farmer, right? And I realized working in that venture that I can see a much bigger problem, that our food system is broken, right? And there are sustainability issues. And so I made my profile around that the third time around. I spoke about the fact that I want to work in food sustainability and that I understand this problem. And so, yeah, my positioning was rich and it made a difference.
Thank you. You said a couple of things I think were very interesting. You said you didn't have to be rich. You went to a good school, but it didn't have to be like the best school in the world. And the most important part of you being able to get the admission and get the scholarships that you're able to get was being able to tell your story properly. And I think I would say it's the exact same for me. I'm Nigerian, so I grew up in on the continent here, and it's a very similar experience. Many of the best schools have a lot more financial support for students than people are aware of. So while many people might just say, I don't have the kind of money these schools charge. That's not all there is. And I would say telling your story properly is usually the main differentiator. In fact, even if people have similar scores in exams like the IGCSE or the KCSE or the ACT or SAT, whatever exams they might be writing, it's typically the way they tell their stories that creates the difference between the person who gets in and the person who doesn't. And more often than not, it's not necessarily, the A plus all-star students who get in. It's usually very good to see that you've done some work in your community, in your society, that you have other interests. Shruti spoke about her work in farming, and I think that was probably very important to getting you in. So I just want to ask, many Kenyan parents, when they hear Oxford or Ivy League, they may think, oh, these are opportunities for only wealthy families, diplomats, or students from elite international schools. What would you say to a Kenyan parent who has already assumed that these opportunities are not for their child?
I'd say break that thought down into two parts. One, if you look at, if you just go to LinkedIn, see, who's studying at the University of Oxford, or reach out to them, and you'd realize that there are many kids who do not come from elite institutions, right? For example, Oxford is a collegiate institute, which means that it's comprised of smaller colleges. And I went to Mansfield College at Oxford, right? Now, Mansfield College is famous for having the highest chunk of students from state schools, which means a lot of UK students who go to Oxford and Cambridge come from private schools, which are more expensive, right? But my college took the majority of state students from who studied at Oxford. So I got that perspective, and I could see that, okay, if a child just works hard enough, right, they also have space at an elite institution. But also, if you're looking at an elite institution, think critically what from that elite institution is empowering that child to make that jump to a place like Oxford, right? So, for example, it could be just that, they expose the child to opportunities for leadership, right? Or they expose the child to better career counselors, right? So, things like that. What is it that will make that 1% jump that and all these what are these 1% jumps that can stack up for your child? So for example, many times people think that if your child studies in a city or like is from a city, they'd have better exposure, but I don't think necessarily that's the case. So I'm from India, and we have really good institutions in smaller parts of the country. And what I have seen with candidates who come from these institutions is that they are able to understand their environment in a better manner than someone from a city, just because when it's a city, too many things are interwoven together and it becomes tedious. So I'll give you an example. For example, in a smaller place, so there is a startup called Food for Education based in Africa, right? And now they supply midday meals, like meals to school children, so that these kids would attend school and be educated. Now I met the founder of that ventures at Oxford during a conference called the School World Forum, and she told me how she came up with that idea was that, well, she came from a small place and she realized that, hey, if this child cannot eat when they want to go to school, then they will not go to school. And so she couldn't see the problem in this interwoven web. She was able to see the problem very clearly. And so the answer to
Mm,
her was very simple, that, hey, if I just feed this kid a meal, this kid would be able to go to school. That's how she
mhm.
started the venture, and now she is recognized the world over, right? She just
Oh,
like did a panel with Trevor Noah at the School World Forum in Oxford. So my point simply is that wherever you come from, look at the opportunities and the strengths that you have in that place, and if you're able to create something of value from that place, your positioning would just not be strong but unique. So no, you don't have to be rich or you don't have to be privileged to belong to these rooms. Just focus on building and communicating your strengths clearly, and you've got it.
interesting. So many of the parents on the call right now and in our WhatsApp community are parents of kids that are, let's say, from ages 11 to 15, 16, and they are looking forward. They're thinking, okay, um, what are the things I can do today to start helping my child set up towards this kind of opportunity? They probably aren't applying this year or next year, but they're really trying to see, I want to broaden my awareness, and I want to broaden my awareness and I want to know how to prepare my child towards these opportunities. So what would you say to the parents of a child who is 12-year-old, 13-year-old, 16-year-old, or that's already close, that has these kind of dreams for their child? What should they be thinking of doing at this time?
Okay, so I'd say just be intentional, right? Uh, For example, if your kids are on the younger side, right, you focus on curiosity, So speaking confidently, asking the right questions, trying different things, right? I mean, I started my entrepreneurial journey in hydroponics. Had I not been curious enough, I would not have started with something as niche as that, right?
Mm.
Focus on exploration, right? Try different competitions, sports, coding, etc. See where you find a space where you can naturally enjoy. And then once you have that space, build depth. So don't do 10 things, right? Narrow into 2 or 3 areas where you can show consistency, responsibility, and leadership. Why? Because when you create your resume or you create an essay to write in to a university, you don't want to say, hey, I did 10 things. You want to say, I did one thing consistently for X years, could be 5, could be 10. And now this is the impact that I've created in that space. And this is what I've learned in that space. I've actually made a difference, right? So just build evidence around that. So and the easiest way to do it is just to align it with your natural strengths, right? So yes, marks matter, your grades matter, but if you're deeply interested in something like climate, health, technology, or even like social issues, align that with something like social entrepreneurship, right?
Interesting. No, that's an amazing answer. You said four things that I thought were really interesting. You said curiosity, consistency, responsibility, and leadership. I noticed you didn't really talk so much about grades, which is where, like, as African parents, we most people really focus on the A's and the grades and the studies and the. How do you think grades match up in terms of being very important to being able to go to some of these best universities versus finding an interest, pursuing that interest, and showing leadership in that interest?
So think of how you position yourself in an application as different components that you're showing the university, right? Grades are one component, right? Your extracurriculars is one component, leadership is one component. So good grades, it's just not one grade, but you actually, you know, they show a trend. So for example, it shows discipline, it shows consistency, it shows, what subjects you're good at and what subjects you have taken, which could be an interesting mix. For example, if someone looks at your grades and be like, this person's taken science and math, but they've also taken philosophy. That it shows, little data points sort of add up to give a glimpse into your choices and your decisions. So, like some curricula, like A levels or IB, are more familiar to international universities. But for example, when I also applied for my undergrad to the US, and I came from this board called CBSE, right, which is national board in India, right? It is not A levels or IB. So in that sense, it didn't matter because I took my SATs for the US and it worked. So it doesn't matter if your grade is well within a system or not, as long as one, they meet the minimum benchmark that the university asks for, and then they
Mhm.
are supplemented by a wholesome array of things like extracurriculars and volunteering and leadership. And if you've started, like, let's say, a local organization or something, or where do you devote your time to, and what are the bigger questions that you're passionate about?
Amazing. Thank you so much for that. That's really amazing. Now, so Shruti, just another question. What do you think is the single most helpful thing a parent of a student who is, again, still that same age range, 12, 13, looking forward? What do you think is the most helpful thing a parent can do to support their child's ambition? And what do you think is the biggest mistake well-meaning parents often make that unintentionally holds their children back from these kinds of opportunities and institutions?
I would say a well-meaning mistake would be to really narrow a child's profile into a very generic bucket, right? For example,
Mm.
grades. Unless your grades are like in the top 0.01%, right? Yes, you'd be above the benchmark that the university asks for, but then you would have nothing else to showcase your profile as unique. So one very
Right.
common example from India is male Indian engineers, right? All of them studied hard, all of them did engineering, and all of them now want to do certain kinds of jobs. So when you apply from a master's point of view, or when you go abroad to do jobs, right? It's the same pool. It is so, it's like an army of male Indian engineers who, in many cases, just don't have a USP, right? So you do not want to make your child just one of the big lot. You want to use this prime time that you have to build your child's profile. So uh, l- create benchmarks for yourself and be like, okay, hey, the university says that the grades need to be above this. So fine, we will
Hmm.
target a healthy score, but we do not have to over optimize for that and overfit the score into like something peak, unless your
Right.
child is like, a mathematical prodigy or something.
That's super helpful. So just to recap, so one of the things Shruti mentioned is that people oftentimes just make their profile too generic. They focus almost entirely on the academics, but then unless you're at the top 1% of 1% in that, and for many of these schools, Oxford and the likes, some of the best students are applying to those schools. So it becomes really difficult to differentiate yourself strictly on the standpoint of an academic profile, which also makes things difficult for those students. So when parents are just like, study hard, get all A's, it's good. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you're expecting that to be a differentiator for the top universities, you might be a bit disappointed. It's very important to make sure your child is curious and aware of the things going on around them, what kind of problems are in the community, how can they use their talents and their resources and whatever skills that they're building to address those problems, because those problems become a unique part of their story that nobody else who is applying to Oxford can duplicate. The problems in Kenya are different from problems in any other country. So when students, even if they're really young, 13, 14, even 12, are showing that kind of initiative, it really, really sets them apart from the pack. And I would say from my own personal experience as well, one of the things a lot of parents struggle with is getting their children to dream big enough to actually think about going to these kinds of universities. So that's something that, if you're on this webinar, there's no reason for you not to push or drive your learner, your child, or even any younger person who you're mentoring towards these kinds of schools. So Shruti, just question along the same lines you spoke on. A lot of these universities talk about leadership, they talk about initiative, they talk about impact. What do those words mean in practice, and what kind of evidence are the admission officers usually looking for when they review an application?
So I would say one way to show leadership is titles, like head girl, head boy, president of a club. But another way is to just simplify it and be like, hey, the child noticed something, took responsibility, and moved something forward, right? That's leadership. And that's actually something tangible that you can show at, a level which is close to you. So, for example, you can say, hey, I served as head girl. Cool, that says a lot of things. But even if
Hmm.
you do not have that title, there are many, many ways of showing leadership which actually might be more impactful. So it shows initiative, that you didn't wait to be told something was that you're passionate about something enough to do something about it, right? That you
Hmm.
started a small organization, or you started a little community initiative, right? Or you lobbied the local government to do something. For example, I was just reading the news today, and the Earthshot Prize, just look it up. It is a very prestigious prize. Went to these three Indian students, school students. They created something using tamarind that removes microplastics from water using a
Okay.
magnet.
Hmm.
And I was like, wow, this is so interesting. And the story was very similar. They went to rural India and they saw this problem that water was stored in big plastic containers, and they started thinking about microplastics, that all these people drinking this water would be so affected by the microplastics but wouldn't even know. And they were like, okay, what can we create and how can we think about creating it in which is so low cost and so easy to do that would work in in a rural Indian setting. And so they went about doing this with their school support and have won the Earthshot Prize, which is very, very prestigious at a global level. Like very
Wow.
tech-enabled startups compete for the Earthshot Prize. So what it just simply means that, look at it. Like if you think about the story, they identified a problem. They thought about it from a strategic perspective that they have to create something low cost. They contextualized the problem. They executed it. They tested it. They brought it to market. They applied to a competition. They won prize, and now they will use the money to scale it. Now, if this sort of a story, right, it doesn't have to be a story at this level, but if you're able to visualize a story like this and you realize, oh, if someone from the admissions committee reads it on a piece of paper, they would be so moved. So any initiative and leadership like this works
Title any
way
day.
better than a title any day.
Makes sense. Makes sense. That's amazing. And just contextualizing from things you've said, it sounds like entrepreneurship is one of the most powerful extracurriculars you can have in for these sort of admission processes. Would you say that's correct or?
Yes, definitely. And in the age of AI, I mean, it's way more easier to embark on it, right? You have all the information at the tip of your finger, right? You can very easily research problems and situations, and you can very easily be, like dumb it down into something very simple that you wanna just like take an initiative on and experiment. So entrepreneurship these days, I mean, it's very, very accessible. So if you're saying that, hey, this is a problem that I'm interested in or passionate about, it's a very normal reaction for a schools adcom to be like, oh, then what did you do about it? Or why haven't you
Hmm,
done anything about it?
hmm. Very interesting. And I know there's some people on the call right now older, um, who are older, but are also still interested in like Oxford. Some people mentioning they want to do PhD or they're interested in doing a master's. What you just said about entrepreneurship, would you say it applies at every level? Like whether you're doing an undergrad or a graduate course, does it apply in both cases?
100%, right? I was watching this YouTube video. I can share the link in a few minutes. By Andreessen 16 Horowitz. It's one of the largest VC firms in the world. They run this accelerator called A16Z Speedrun. So they closed their latest cohort recently, and they were talking about the kind of applications they got. And the interesting insight was that back in the day, let's say 10 years back, with the sort of applications they would get would be, from a very certain specific kind of candidates who are not PhDs or who are not master students, right? But
Hmm,
now the sort of candidate applications they get for their startup accelerator are people with ideas who are doing their masters or PhDs, because now they have tools so readily available to use their research and the tech ideas that they have and be able to sort of put that into something concrete with AI tools very easily. So I can put
interesting.
that video link, but it's a interesting shift in the market.
Wow, that would be very helpful. Please do share the link and let's talk about the question every parent and everybody here is probably thinking about, which is money, because getting an admission is just one part of the hurdle. Being able to afford these schools is also a very big deal. What scholarships? First, I think this would be a two-part question. First is how readily available are scholarships to some of these top universities? Are there a lot of scholarships, or would you say it's very, very few? And typically, how competitive are these scholarships? I know you've gotten a few scholarships yourself and helped other people get scholarships. How accessible are these scholarships? And if someone says, "Oh, I think I have a good enough profile for Oxford, for Cambridge, for whatever, but I don't know that I can afford it," would you still encourage the person strongly? And how much do you think the likelihood of someone who is passionate about going to one of these schools to find a scholarship is?
I think it's a this is a pragmatic question that needs to be looked at pragmatically, right? So, scholarships are need-based, merit-based. Some can be
Mhm.
country-specific, right? You have to look at what the source of the scholarship is. Some are administered by the university, some are administered by your local or national government, right? Some are administered by independent companies working in the space, right? Some are university-specific scholarships, some are attached to leadership, entrepreneurship. For me, it was social entrepreneurship, public service, right? Specific field. So it's a whole landscape. The biggest mistakes that I see people making is that they think about scholarships right at the end, right? So they first look at, creating an application and submitting it, and then they think about, okay, how do we fund this? Your scholarship planning has to start early because
Mhm.
one, your approach to the application then changes completely. Second, where you apply to changes completely. There are some institutions that are heavily funded, and so they have money to offer. There are some
Mhm.
institutions that are not very heavily funded, and so they do not have money to offer. And one example is, let's say, Oxford versus a school like London Business School or INSEAD, right? INSEAD, it does not have that big a pool of scholarships versus its cohort size. So that means the number
Right.
of people it intakes every year versus the number of scholarships it offers, that ratio. And if you compare that to Oxford, Oxford is way more generous when it comes to the MBA
Mhm.
space. So the course you're applying to at the university you're applying to, look at the universities that apply to the course that you want to go for, and then look at what their funding pool looks like, right? And in that funding pool, where do you fit in? Right? Do you fit in some generic scholarships? Good. Do you fit in some specific scholarships? Even better, right? What do the timeline of that scholarship looks like? For many of the scholarships have their rounds close earlier. So for example, if a school has 4 or 5 rounds that you can apply to in a particular season, the scholarship may be only applicable to candidates who apply in the first few rounds, right? So those
Mhm.
become
Mhm.
limiting factors. So I'm quickly like sharing, a bunch of different factors that come in together to do this planning, right? So I would say, to simplify this, for undergrad study, just think about, just understand which universities offer generous financial aid to international students, because
Mhm.
many universities only offer it, or, have most of their aid allocated to local students. Then
Right.
for master study, look at external scholarships, field specific funding as well. And don't limit yourself by initially asking, can we afford this university? There are many ways of funding education. Think about which opportunities are realistic for your child's profile and how do you build towards those outcomes early. So, for example, look at, for example, Stanford has, let's say, a night Hennessy program, right? Look
Mhm.
at what sort of profiles do they take in. And if I want those, if I want to demonstrate those outcomes in my child's profile, you have X years to work towards that. Just work towards that.
Wow. Amazing, 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 amazing advice, and very, very pragmatic stuff. So one of the things she mentioned is that, the whole thing about scholarships is a very practical issue. Different universities have different funds and opportunities for scholarship. So you need to know which ones have general scholarship opportunities might fall into, which ones give a lot of scholarships compared to their batch, and which scholarships fit your specific profile. So it's not one fit all. Um, and there are specific scholarships that may be targeted at a particular country or a particular demography or a particular community, depending on the university. So you have to be careful about choosing both your course and your university when you're considering, oh, how can I get opportunities for scholarships? But if you look out for the opportunities do exist. So that's super useful. And I'm going to bring up someone on the group sent a question, and he said, are there scholarships for people doing things like doctorates, or are the scholarships only for younger learners? I do think there's scholarships all across board from the really young ones, um, even up to the doctorate level. But I'll let Shruti throw more light into that. From what I've seen, um, there are scholarships across board as long as, like she said, you're doing your research properly and taking note of what different institutions
Shruti,
do you want
offer.
to
But
answer that?
Shruti,
Do you want to answer that?
Yes. So one, use AI tools, right? They're a great resource. Put in your profile information and ask for them to find scholarships for the kind of courses or universities or geographies you're aiming at. Very simple. But secondly, let's talk Oxford in specific. There is a scholarship called Rhodes, extremely prestigious, which applies to, in your words, younger learners, right, till undergrad study. And then you have even, I mean, Rhodes also focuses on masters, postgrads, etc. But the one at undergrad is super famous. And then you have the Chevening Scholarship for Commonwealth countries, right? So if you're going to do a postdoctorate or masters, etc., in especially fields like law, policy, Chevening is very, very useful and prestigious. So check that out as well.
Amazing. And just Shruti, imagine
Mm.
you have an 11-year-old. You want to prepare them for Oxford, and you're trying to map or Cambridge or any of these schools, and you're trying to map that out between now and when they're 16, 17, and they can be applying directly to these schools, or maybe 18, as the case may be. But you want to map out their journey. So 11 to 13, 13 to 15, 15 to 17. So let's put it in those 2-year brackets. What are you trying to get them to focus on between the age of 11 to 13, and then between the ages of 13 to 15, and then between 15 to 17?
I would say until 13 years old, as I shared earlier, I would just focus on curiosity and experimentation. So do
Mm,
that through areas where they can actually learn something, but also sort of like, let's take coding, for example, right? If your child learns how to code, and there are 5-year or 6-year-olds learning how to code these days, right? Not in very complicated languages, but there are courses out there that really simplify it for a child to understand what coding is all about. So
mhm.
something like coding, right, or digital fluency in whatever shape or form your child explores it, just allows them to dig in deeper and deeper and deeper and find their own way. So, right. So for something like this, until 13 years of age, I would just expose them to different sort of arenas and get them to build technical skills that allow them to express their curiosity and experiment, right? Then post 13, they would have an idea of what do they like, right? And they would have built some sort of consistency. Like, let's say they've been dancing for a couple of years, or they've been
Mhm.
coding for a couple of years, right? Then we build deeper skills that as like a layer on top. So for example, communication or judgment, resilience, right? Ability to work with different kinds of people through different initiatives. So I'd be like, okay, if you feel important about, if you feel that something like waste management is important, right? Because you don't like people littering, or you feel climate is important to you and you want to look at recycling, then what are you going to do about it, right? Create an
Mm,
initiative, or write to your local counselor, or show some kind of judgment, or like bring your friends together to do something. Like, start with something and do it over a period of time. Don't just leave it in 6 months. Do it over a period of time, over, let's say, 2 years, at a few hours every week, which will build your skills in so many areas, right? You'll learn
yeah.
logistics, you'll learn communication, you'll learn funding, different things, right? Um, and then post 15 or post 18, I'll be like, okay, fine. Now, whatever is your niche that you have over this 13 to 18-year funnel, you've sort of narrowed down, then just get in. That becomes your unique positioning that you're then going to showcase to the universities that you apply to.
Amazing. So just a recap, and I hope everyone got that. So before the age of between the ages of before the age of 13, focus on building their curiosity. let them explore, let them dabble into different things and figure out what takes their interest, what do they fancy, what do they enjoy, get them to go far and wide in terms of trying to explore what stimulates them the most, right? And between the ages of 13 to 15, focus on getting them to show initiative and consistency. So they've had this period of exploring before, before and at the age of 13, where they've been trying this, trying that, and figured out that they like some things more than other things. Between 13 to 15, they're focused on initiatives. They're focused on, oh, let me try this project, or let me put this thing together. And as they're doing that, try to get them to be consistent. At least have them do things for a 6 month period or longer so that they have a bit of a track record. And then once they're over 15, 15 to 18, 18 upwards, whatever that looks like, get them to go deep, right? This is where they're no longer just playing on a shallow level. They're actually trying to deepen their experience and their mastery. But most importantly, they're playing for positioning. They're trying to position themselves. So 15, 16, 17, you're not just doing different things, you're crafting your story. You're figuring out, how do I tell this story in a way that differentiates me from the pack, in a way that makes me stand out? What are the unique elements of my story that make me interesting for some of these opportunities? And then you're using this time to flesh out that story and really improve your profile. That's a really amazing answer. I could not have said it better. Let me give a bit more context as well, in line with Shruti's answer about what Akili Learn does as well. Because in many cases, it's difficult for people to know exactly where they can get help. We're talking about your child getting curious about different things, showing initiative about different things, positioning themselves for the different things that they're doing. But many a time you need a tutor that can help you figure out, oh, where does your curiosity lie? Where do your strengths lie? What are the problems? How do you go about it? A tutor, a coach, a mentor, any of these can be extremely helpful. And that's one of the things that Akili Learn provides. So primarily, we provide tutors who can help with academics, but for people who also want things beyond academics, who want some level of mentorship for their kids or coaching for their kids, Akili Learn can connect you with coaches and tutors and mentors and people who can help your child to be properly prepared for these opportunities. So that's just a little about what we do. Shruti, imagine a Kenyan parent is leaving this webinar and wants to do one thing this weekend that could meaningfully improve their child's future opportunities. What would you suggest is one or two things that very pragmatic that they should certainly consider in terms of improving their children's opportunities?
I would say just sit with your child this weekend, have one honest conversation, right? Children have a lot of ideas, and sometimes they're just hesitant to share, because they'd be like, maybe it's going to sound stupid or impractical, or sometimes they just don't verbalize it because they don't think it can happen, right? So when they're given a safe space where they can be like, oh, I can share any idea that I have, and if it's doable, my parent would actually enable me to do something about it, right? If they have that sort of a safe space, it could be very useful. So just ask them things like, what are you curious about right now, right? Is there any problem in the world that or in our community that bothers you? What activity do you do that makes you lose track of time? Or what is the one thing that you would like to try over the next 3 months, right? You can repeat this sort of exercise once. You can do it every weekend. You can, you can write it down, and then you will have all these different things that your child would have shared with you. Or it could be something very narrow and very specific. And from there, you would know what is the one small action that you want to start with, right? It could be joining a club, it could be a
Mm,
reading habit, it could be emailing a mentor and seeing what the options are for the child. It could be volunteering consistently. It could be building a small project or researching universities or aligning your next vacation with a university visit. It could be anything, right? It doesn't have to be a perfect plan. Just just pay attention to what your child is becoming, and then you can just build from there.
Fantastic. And Shruti, I know you've helped many people get into these institutions, get scholarships. I know you're building MBA co-pilots, focus more on the MBA side. But could you, tell us a bit more about the work you've done in helping people get access to some of these best schools and where and how, anyone on the call can find you in case, someone wants to reach out specifically, someone wants to talk to you more, someone wants to get coaching, mentorship, or consult with you, where can they, what are you doing? How are you helping people? Where can they find you?
Okay. So thank you, Wes. I do two things. One, I'm an admissions consulting. So whether you're applying for a master's program or and specifically something like an MBA, which is a Master of Business Administration, or MIM or MFA, these sort of master's courses, right? I help people, I work with them as a consultant to do their applications end to end, prepare them for interviews, get them scholarships, and then negotiate their scholarships to a higher amount as well. So I started this work in the last 2 years. I take very selected candidates every year, and I have 100% admit rate. So my candidates have gone on to universities like Oxford, Cambridge, Berkeley in the US, INSEAD, London Business School, and many of them with significant scholarships. So I had two school scholars, that means full ride, 100% tuition paid to Oxford last year, and one to Oxford this year, starting in September, and one to IE, which is in Spain. I am The second thing that I do is I'm building an AI product called MBA Copilot. The idea is that a big significant majority of the people who apply to master's programs cannot comfortably afford a consultant. So, and there is knowledge out there. You can talk to people, you can research, you can use AI tools, but it is very complicated and it necessarily does not get you the quality of output that a very expensive consultant would do. So I am putting in my knowledge, my playbook, my insights into this AI product so that anyone can just pay, let's say, a few $100, get an annual subscription, and do as many applications as they need to master's programs to get the same kind of output and scholarship guidance as they would get from an expensive consultant. So that's the promise. I'm building it. We are going to launch soon, targeting June. So fingers crossed. And if you want to reach out to me, if you have any questions, I have posted my LinkedIn on the chat box. So you can just reach out to me there and follow me. So thank you.
Wow, that is incredibly, incredibly amazing. Thank you so much. And I'll also post her LinkedIn on the WhatsApp group in case anyone wants to reach out. Obviously, she doesn't do this for free, but she's speaking with us on this call right now for free. So we're very, very, very grateful. And yeah, she talked a bit about the impressive results that she's gotten for people. Many of those I know about as well. So we're very honored to have you with us on this call. So Shruti, I'm just going to ask, do you have any parting words, parting thoughts, things that you think, anyone on this call should really go away with and sit on and think about, especially as it comes to them taking advantage of some of these university opportunities and other, global world-class opportunities that they are ambitious for their child to get access to?
I think, I mean, I'm gonna contextualize this and focus on AI. I think it's a very recent phenomena, but it's changed everything, right? So I believe parents should now focus less on memorization and more on adaptability, right?
Mm,
Now knowledge is at our fingertips, so memorization's not gonna do anything, right? If you're gonna just like put in a prompt on ChatGPT and get the answer straight up, right?
true.
Um, it's so then we need to raise children in a way where they can learn quickly, think clearly, communicate well. and solve real problems, right? So your technical
Mhm.
skills definitely matter, but your technical skills like coding, financial literacy, how to sort of how digitally fluent you are, right? All these things are useful, but they are playgrounds for people to learn skills, right? To be creative, to experiment. The deeper skills now are curiosity, writing, judgment, creativity. What do you think about ethics, ability to work, as I said, with different kinds of people? I've said this before. So just um, your average work with AI is anyway going to be easier to produce, right? So focus on your real advantages now in this new paradigm, right? What do you do for your child to build strong judgment? If they are being interviewed by someone, how does your child gain the skills to ask better questions, right? To have sharper thinking. So just yeah, simplify your life in a way that you just help your child build, and that's it.
Phenomenal advice, Shruti. Thank you so much. And yeah, I would completely agree. I think I would also say in this age of AI, like you said, it's easier than ever to start implementing ideas, right? You don't have to spend as much time coding and doing many of those setup things that took so much time. So more and more, candidates for different opportunities will be judged not on, say, like how smart they are in that academic sense, but more and more people will be judged on the kinds of problems they solved or whether they took initiative, because the barriers to taking initiative has never been as low as it is today. So if you're a parent here or even an adult who is looking at some of these opportunities, um, it's not going to be just about learning and grades. Take action, show initiative, show the world that you can solve problems. And like Shruti said, many of these opportunities favor people who have shown some level of entrepreneurship and leadership very, very heavily. So take advantage of the problems around you by creating initiatives that solve them, and that would make you stand out for any of these type of opportunities. Shruti, we're very grateful. Thank you for your time. Thank you for all the wisdom that you've shared. And for every parent here, thank you so much. We celebrate you, we congratulate you, because you're definitely ahead of the pack in terms of wanting the best for your child, but beyond just the wanting, you're actually taking time off your schedule, you're learning, you're involving yourself in things like this. Thank you so much for being here, and grateful for your time. It's 1 minute after 7, and this has been the Akili Learn webinar about how to help your child get into Oxford, Cambridge, and other Ivy League universities. We hope the information shared has been helpful. Thank you so much. Have a great evening. And thank you once more to Shruti. The advice you shared has been very practical, very pragmatic, very useful. We're grateful for your time and have a very good day.
Thank you so much. Really been a pleasure. If you ever want to reach out to me, you can do so on LinkedIn or via Akili Learn. Thank you.
Yes, so her LinkedIn would be placed on the WhatsApp group. Feel free to reach out if you want to. Have a great day, everyone, and good night.